It wasn't mine. The sweater in the laundry basket. That's how this all starts. Not with a fight, or a text, or a lipstick stain. Just a sweater. It was a dark forest green pullover. Too big for her. Too expensive for us. I'd never seen her wear it. I'd never worn it either. And yet, there it was, fresh out of the dryer, folded neatly between my gym shorts and one of her vintage tees. I just stood there staring at it, holding it like it was ticking. And you know what the worst part was? It smelled like our house. Like her shampoo and lemon detergent. Like it belonged. Like it had roots in our closet. That sweater shouldn't have felt familiar. But it did. So I asked her later that night. I waited until we were brushing our teeth. I said, "Hey, where'd that green sweater come from?" She didn't even look up from the mirror. She just said, "What sweater?" You know that feeling when your stomach drops before your brain catches up? Yeah, that. I tried to explain. I even pointed to the basket still sitting by the hallway door. But she just shook her head and mumbled, "Probably yours," before walking off mid-sentence like I was being ridiculous. But it wasn't mine. And that was the first thread. That was Tuesday. By Wednesday night, she told me, "Don't touch me tonight." And by Thursday morning, I had whispered goodbye without ever packing a bag. But I didn't leave. Not yet. I needed answers. I needed to understand how a stranger's sweater made it into my house, into my laundry, into my life, without leaving a single trace. The truth unraveled faster than I was ready for. And it all started with the wrong sweater. The morning after she said, "Don't touch me tonight," I woke up before she did. Not on purpose. I hadn't really slept. My mind was on fire, spinning in weird directions. I'd counted the cars that drove past the window, listened to the heating pipes creak, stared at the ceiling until shadows shifted into shapes I didn't recognize. Everything suddenly felt unfamiliar, like I'd been dropped into a version of my life that looked the same but didn't feel right. She was still asleep when I got up, curled in a soft coil under the blanket like she always did, hair half in her face, mouth slightly open. I watched her for maybe a minute, wondering how many nights she'd been pretending. How many mornings she'd kissed me with lips that had already whispered someone else's name. I wanted to believe it was all in my head, that I was just being paranoid, insecure, overthinking things like I always do. But then I saw her phone blinking on the nightstand. It was face down like always, like she was hiding something in plain sight. And I swear, I wasn't going to touch it. I swear. But it lit up again, just once. And in that half second, I saw a name I didn't recognize. Ewan. Not Owen. Not Evan. Ewan. The hell kind of name is that? I picked it up. The message preview had disappeared. My thumb hovered. I didn't unlock it. I didn't need to. Because right then, she stirred and said, "What are you doing?" Her voice was calm. Too calm. No panic. No surprise. Just control. Like she'd been rehearsing that exact question for weeks. I fumbled something stupid like, thought it was my phone, and set it down. She smiled. Got up. Showered. Said she had to leave early, staff meeting. And just like that, she was gone. No kiss. No second glance. I sat on the edge of the bed for a long time, staring at the green sweater still folded on the chair. I picked it up again. No label. No brand tag. Just soft wool and faint cologne. I sniffed it like some lunatic. It smelled like mint and smoke. Familiar, but not mine. That's when I noticed something I hadn't before. Inside the collar, stitched in tiny green thread, were two letters. E.C. Ewan. C. I dropped it like it burned. My hands were shaking. And yeah, I know how I sound. Obsessive. Pathetic. Like one of those guys who reads too much into everything. But this wasn't in my head. This wasn't anxiety or imagination. This was real. Something was happening in my house. In my bed. In my laundry basket. I didn't go to work that day. I called in sick, opened a blank document, and started writing everything down. Every strange moment. Every offhand comment. Every unexplained hour. By noon, I had 10 pages. By 2, I decided to call the number she always said was her sister's landline, the one she used for emergencies when her cell was dead. She said it was her sister Mallory's house, a landline in upstate New Hampshire. I'd never actually spoken to Mallory, not once in 6 years, but apparently, they were close. So I dialed the number. Hands sweaty, heart thudding like a drum. 1 ring, 2, 3, then a voice answered. But it wasn't a woman. It was a man. Gruff. Sleepy. Yeah? I froze. I didn't speak. He repeated, "Hello?" I hung up. There was no Mallory. There never had been. The lie had teeth now, and I was finally bleeding. I wasn't planning to track her. That wasn't the kind of husband I thought I was. But that was before the sweater, before the man's voice on the other end of the sister's phone, and before she started locking her car, something she hadn't done in 5 years, even when it was parked in our garage. I noticed she started carrying a tote bag she never used before, something deep brown and shapeless that looked like it could hide a second life. Every part of me screamed to confront her. Just ask. Rip it open. Get it over with. But I didn't. I wanted proof. I needed it. For myself. For closure. For sanity. So I dug up the old iPad we barely used anymore, synced to her Apple ID, something she forgot about after our trip to Montreal 3 years ago. It was still connected to her iCloud, still showed location history, still had access to shared devices. I sat there on the couch, staring at the tiny pulsing blue that showed her driving toward 12th and Beach. Nowhere near the school library she claimed to be covering a late shift at. I watched that dot pause in a residential neighborhood for exactly 47 minutes. No stores, no offices, just a street of brownstones with no public parking. I zoomed in until the map gave me a house number, 226. Then the dots started moving again. Back to the school, as if nothing happened. I didn't say anything when she got home. She had a sandwich in a paper bag and some pamphlets from the school district's faculty board. She kissed my cheek, said she was exhausted, asked if we could skip dinner and maybe just watch something dumb. I agreed. My stomach was twisting in knots, but I played along. I laughed at the show. I passed her the remote. I didn't blink when she leaned on my shoulder like she hadn't lied through her teeth hours earlier. The next morning, I returned to that address. 226 Beach. A rundown blue townhouse with cracked stone steps and a dead potted plant by the front door. I stood across the street pretending to check my phone, watching for signs of life. A curtain moved. A light flickered. Then, and I swear my breath caught, I saw him. A man stepped out. Mid-30s, maybe a little younger than me. Slim build, long tan coat, dark beard. He looked normal. Too normal. Like the kind of guy you'd forget seeing even if you bumped into him twice in the same day. He had a gym bag slung over one shoulder and was locking the front door behind him. I snapped a picture, zoomed in, and just as I was about to turn away, my blood went ice. He was wearing the green sweater. Not a green sweater, the green sweater. The exact stitching. Same neckline. Same worn elbow patch. I didn't know how to process it. Part of me wanted to run up to him, ask him outright where he got it. Another part wanted to follow him, tail him like some amateur spy. Instead, I stood frozen as he got into a silver Subaru and drove off without looking back. Later that night, she came home humming. Like actually humming. She only does that when she's deeply relaxed. When her world feels unshakable. I offered to make pasta. She said, "You're sweet," and disappeared into the shower. While she was rinsing off, her phone buzzed on the counter. One message. No name. Just a number I didn't recognize. Miss you already. 47 minutes wasn't enough. I stared at that screen so long my vision blurred. I didn't open it. I didn't take a screenshot. I just memorized the number, letter by letter, digit by digit, like it was a code burned into my bones. She came out in a robe, smelling like rosemary conditioner and betrayal. I told her she looked beautiful. She smiled and kissed me again. We ate in silence, watched a movie, and she fell asleep on the couch halfway through. But I didn't. I was busy typing that number into a burner lookup site. And the name that came back wasn't Ewan. It was Colby Eames. No one she'd ever mentioned. Not even once. But his initials? CE. I looked at the sweater again later that night. Maybe I'd misread the stitching. Maybe it wasn't EC. After all, maybe it was always CE. And maybe, just maybe, that wasn't her mistake. It was mine. I didn't sleep again. Not even a little. I sat on the floor of our guest room. The room we used to call the reading den back when things were good, surrounded by a half circle of printouts. Reverse phone lookups, cached map directions, screenshots of iCloud locations, everything. I felt like I was building a murder board, except I wasn't connecting suspects or motives. I was connecting moments. Small ones. Forgotten glances. A nervous laugh. A slight overreaction when I asked if she still talked to her ex from college. I wasn't investigating her. I was investigating us. And the longer I stared at this quiet evidence, the more I realized how much I had missed. Or ignored. I don't know which is worse. By 4 a.m., I knew I had to see Colby Eames in person. I didn't want to confront him. Not yet. But I needed to know who he was, how he moved. What kind of person wore another man's sweater into a stranger's home and then let a married woman fold it into her husband's laundry like it belonged? I waited until Friday, when she had parent committee night. Another lie I didn't bother questioning. She left at 6. By 6:15, I was parked on Beach Street, watching the windows of 226 glow with soft lamplight and shadows. He came out around 7:10. Same coat, same stride. Only this time, he wasn't alone. She followed him, hair in a bun, that same brown toad on her shoulder. Laughing like she hadn't sat across from me just 24 hours ago, helping me choose new curtains for the hallway. They got into the Subaru and pulled off. I followed from 4 cars back, windows cracked, heart thudding so loud I could barely hear myself think. They drove 10 minutes west, into a neighborhood I hadn't been to in years, some artsy district full of wine bars and lofts and cafes that spelled coffee with a K. They parked, got out, and walked into a place called the Crooked Spoon. Somewhere fancy enough to be quiet. Somewhere you'd take someone you weren't supposed to be seen with. I parked across the street and waited. 15 minutes. 30. An hour. I got out. I paced. I told myself I'd leave. I didn't. And then I saw them through the window. She wasn't just sitting close, she was touching his face. Her fingers on his beard like she was reading him in Braille. He leaned in, kissed her on the cheek, then whispered something in her ear that made her smile the way she used to smile at me when I brought her bagels on Sundays. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. The rage didn't hit all at once. It came in quiet waves. Cold. Slow. Numbing. I turned and walked 3 blocks before I realized I was crying. Not the loud kind. The dry, cracked kind that makes your whole face hurt. I sat in the car, gripping the steering wheel like it could stop the ground from collapsing under me. I didn't drive home. I didn't have a plan. But somewhere in the middle of that chaos, a strange thought crossed my mind, one I didn't expect. How long had she been protecting him? Because this wasn't some drunken mistake. This wasn't an affair born from boredom. This was deep, intimate, practiced. And the more I replayed the way she looked at him, the more it hit me. She wasn't hiding him from me. She was hiding me from him. Somehow, I was the secret. I drove home in silence. She came back after midnight, the smell of perfume and wine hanging off her like steam. She said nothing. I pretended to sleep. But I wasn't done. The next day, while she showered, I looked through the brown tote. I never touched her things before, but I was already living in a world where rules didn't matter. Inside the bag, a slim black leather notebook with no title, no branding. I opened it expecting recipes or book lists. Instead, the pages were covered in sketches. Dozens of them. Some messy, some detailed. All of them of me. Sleeping, shaving, laughing. One of me crying. The same way I did the day my father died. I hadn't cried like that in years. I thought I'd been alone. She had drawn that moment from memory. Every hair, every wrinkle, the bags under my eyes, the way my hands clenched. But the final page, the last sketch in the book, wasn't of me at all. It was a mirror. And in the mirror was her face behind me, smiling, watching me in silence. I kept the sketchbook hidden in the drawer under the bathroom sink, beneath the old heating pads and expired allergy pills. I didn't know what to do with it. I didn't want to confront her yet, not because I was afraid of the argument, but because I knew she would win it. Alara always knew how to control a room without raising her voice. She was calm the way surgeons are calm. And if I showed her the sketches, she'd already have a story in place. She'd laugh gently, tilt her head, and say it was just a way of processing love. Artists see things differently, she'd say. I could already hear her rehearsed lines, and I wasn't ready to lose again. But something about that last drawing, the one of her reflection behind me in the mirror, wouldn't leave my mind. It wasn't just creepy. It felt predictive, intentional, almost like it wasn't just art, but a warning. I started noticing things after that. Small things, like how she always locked the bathroom door when she showered, even though she never used to. Or how she'd sometimes mutter to herself while washing dishes, her lips forming words I couldn't quite catch unless I leaned in. I thought I heard her say, "He doesn't know," one night. Another time, it was almost there. Almost where? One evening, I decided to check the coat closet by the front door, the one we rarely used. Behind the winter coats and old umbrellas was a small tin box I didn't recognize. Inside, An envelope with a spare set of car keys, a single Polaroid of her in Colby at what looked like a lake cabin, and a silver key with no label. It was heavier than a house key, too smooth to be for our doors. No scratches, nowhere. Like it had never been used. I didn't recognize it, not even close. But when I held it, I felt something tighten in my chest. Like it meant something. I placed everything back exactly as I found it and sat on the edge of our bed, staring at the floor for nearly 40 minutes. Every fiber in me wanted to scream. Not because she had secrets. I'd already accepted that. But because now, her secrets had infrastructure. A physical component. Not just texts. Not just time. But locations. Locks. Maps I hadn't been invited to. And yet she still kissed me goodnight. That Friday, I faked a trip. I told her I needed to drive to my hometown to help my cousin move furniture. She barely looked up from her tea when I said it. Just said, drive safe, like she was glad I'd be gone. I left at 9 a.m., circled the block twice, then parked around the corner and waited. At 9:36, she came out wearing jeans and a blue jacket I'd never seen before. She didn't take her car. She walked 3 blocks, then climbed into the passenger side of a black sedan waiting at the curb. I couldn't see the driver, but I didn't need to. I followed. They drove for nearly 40 minutes, out of town and toward the foothills, then turned off the highway onto a narrow gravel road with no signs and dense trees. I stayed far behind, windows down, fingers cold on the steering wheel. Finally, they pulled into a long gravel driveway that disappeared behind a set of rusted iron gates. The sedan paused. She leaned out the window and used a key on a chain lock, not the car key, not the house key. That key, the one from the tin box. The gates opened. The sedan drove through. I parked behind a line of trees and followed on foot. It wasn't until I reached the clearing that I saw the house. It was a cabin. No number. No mailbox. Just stone and pine and smoke curling out of a chimney like it was lived in regularly. And they were inside. I crept close enough to see silhouettes behind the curtains. At one point, she passed in front of the window, laughing again, holding a glass of wine. Then she disappeared into another room. For 20 minutes, I stood there in the cold. I wanted to smash the window, kick the door down, burn it all. But instead, I backed away, got in my car, drove home in silence. She returned the next morning, acting like she had a headache and had just been at school reviewing test inventory. She asked if we had any frozen waffles. I said nothing, just handed her the box. She didn't even look at me. That night, I took the silver key and pressed it into a bar of soap, made a mold, placed it back in the tin. I didn't have a locksmith I trusted, but I knew a guy from college who did 3D printing and side gigs with security modeling. I emailed him a photo of the mold and told him I needed a replica made. I didn't explain why. 3 days later, he mailed me the copy. I held the replica in my hand like a question I didn't want answered, but I knew I was going to use it, and I knew I wasn't going alone. I waited 4 days before going back to the cabin. I told her I had to drive out for a client meeting on the other side of the state, some excuse about debugging on-site equipment for a project I barely remembered. She nodded absently and asked if I could stop by the store and grab more oat milk on the way back, like I was just a side character in her routine. She didn't ask where, didn't ask who. I said yes and left before I changed my mind. I had the key in my pocket and the 3D printed copy tucked into the lining of my glove compartment. I wasn't entirely sure what I expected to find, or even what I was looking for. Evidence? Closure? Proof I wasn't going insane. By the time I reached the turnoff to the gravel road, it was late morning. The sun was bright but thin, filtered through clouds like a weak spotlight. The iron gate looked older in daylight, warped, weathered, barely hanging on one hinge. I used the replica key and felt it click with a quiet, satisfying finality. It fit perfectly. The gate swung open slower than I expected, creaking just enough to set my teeth on edge. I drove in slowly, heart pounding like a trapped bird in my chest. The cabin sat in a small clearing surrounded by trees that leaned in too close, as if they were trying to hear secrets. It wasn't abandoned, but it didn't feel lived in either. The air didn't have the stale stillness of an unused space. It had a scent, faint lavender, warm wood, faint citrus. Nothing about it felt old. Someone had vacuumed recently. There were no cobwebs, no dust on the furniture. The fridge hummed. A pile of magazines on the kitchen table was arranged by date, current ones, with pages folded at seemingly random spots. I walked through the main room slowly, like I was trespassing in someone else's dream. There was a small record player on a side table. It wasn't playing, but the needle was resting on a record halfway through. The label was blank. No album cover in sight. I lifted the arm and set it back into its dock. The silence that followed felt heavier than the sound. In the bedroom, I found a half-packed suitcase. Men's clothing. A black scarf, cologne, 2 pairs of shoes. I recognized the cologne. It was the same scent that had soaked into the green sweater. I opened the closet and found only women's clothes. Hers. Folded, hanging, organized in a way she never did at home. Tighter. Neater. Like she was trying harder here. There were 2 toothbrushes in the bathroom, but only 1 razor. 1 towel on the rack. 1 used bar of soap. On the nightstand was a photo frame, but the image had been removed, cleanly, without damage. Just a blank white insert behind the glass. That's when I noticed something even more strange. There was no mirror in the bedroom. Not above the dresser. Not in the bathroom. Nowhere. Just bare nails and faint rectangular outlines on the walls where mirrors had once been. I don't know why, but that scared me more than anything. I took pictures of everything. The drawers. The closet. The photo frame. Even the empty mirror hooks. I went outside and circled the cabin, looking for signs of anything else. Another car. A second entrance. Tire marks. Nothing. But around the back, I noticed something off about the foundation. One section of the stonework was cleaner than the rest, like it had been scrubbed or replaced recently. I knelt down and tapped it. Hollow. There was a panel. A false wall. I pried it open. Behind it, tucked into a crawl space not big enough for a person but just big enough for storage, I found a metal lockbox. Heavy. Coated. No keyhole. Just a 5-digit keypad on the front, blinking dimly. I tried obvious combinations. Our anniversary. Her birthday, 00000, 12,345. Nothing worked. The box stayed locked. I took photos, slid it back into the space, sealed the panel, and backed away. My heart was racing too fast. My head hurt. The sun had shifted, and the trees felt like they were leaning closer. As I left, I saw something new, something that hadn't been there earlier. A shape in the upstairs window. I swear on everything, it was her. Just her silhouette. Watching me. Not panicked. Not surprised. Just watching. I got in the car and didn't stop driving until I was 30 miles out. I didn't look in the rearview mirror once. That night, she said she had a migraine and went to bed early. I stood in the hallway, outside our bedroom, listening to her breathing through the door. It was too even. Too controlled. I knew she was awake. I didn't say goodnight. And for the first time since this began, I stopped asking myself if she was cheating. Because I no longer believed I was the victim of betrayal. I started to believe I was the target of something much, much worse. It started with the photograph. I was in our garage, pretending to reorganize old storage bins so she wouldn't question why I was in there for over an hour. I told her I was finally going to deal with the chaos, and she laughed and said, "Well, don't throw out my Christmas boxes." I nodded, smiled, lied. She had no idea I was looking for his box, the one I was almost certain she had hidden out here. Something about Colby felt recent, close, like he wasn't just part of a secret life, but part of our space, our daily rhythm. I checked every bin for signs, letters, receipts, keys, a forgotten shirt, anything I could use to understand the blueprint of their deception. And after about 45 minutes, beneath a box of tangled Christmas lights, I found a photo tucked inside a paperback copy of The Stranger by Camus. A strange choice. She never read Camus. She used to say translated literature always loses the soul. But inside that yellowed book was a single Polaroid, half-faded, like it had been hidden for years. It wasn't a photo of her, or Colby, or the cabin. It was me. Me, sitting in what looked like a diner, wearing a shirt I didn't recognize, sipping coffee, and staring at something out of frame. The expression on my face was blank. Not bored. Not relaxed. Blank. Like my thoughts had been erased. I don't remember this photo being taken. I don't remember ever being in a diner like that. The background showed a mural of sea creatures on the wall. Cartoonish, childish, something you'd see in a beach town. I hadn't been near the coast in over a year. On the back of the photo was a single handwritten line, all capital letters. Do not tell him yet. The air in the garage felt too still. My ears rang. I stared at the message, trying to make it make sense. Who wrote it? And who was it written for? Not me. Clearly, I was the him. But who was giving orders? I put the photo in my wallet and went back inside. She was on the couch, headphones in, watching something on her laptop with a slight smile. Probably some stupid British baking show. She looked peaceful. She always did when she was pretending nothing was happening. I sat across from her, pretending to scroll on my phone, but my brain was screaming. I wasn't even angry anymore. I was somewhere beyond rage, where everything just floats in a slow-motion fog. I wasn't even afraid. I was untethered, like someone had cut the strings of the reality I'd built, and I was drifting in a version of life I didn't sign up for. And that's when the email arrived. A single message. No subject. No sender. Just an auto-generated Outlook address and a file attachment labeled reveal_access_logs. Zip. I didn't open it right away. I watched her for a few more minutes. She hadn't seen the message. Didn't flinch. Didn't glance at me. I excused myself to the bathroom and locked the door. Opened my laptop. Turned on a VPN. Scanned the file twice. Clean. Then I unzipped it. Inside were three things: a PDF, a CSV file, and an audio recording. The PDF was a transcript of a server's IP logs, timestamps, page accesses, geolocation pings, all tied to a user listed only as guest_beta. The data showed logins from two locations, our house and a cabin, both during hours when she claimed to be working. The CSV was a list of searches, thousands of them. Phrases like, how to erase a memory in dream state, covert behavioral therapy home methods, microdosing for compliance, mild hypnosis language patterns. When does a person stop noticing changes in themselves? And then the audio. I almost didn't press play, but I did. It was a conversation, a distorted one, filtered through static, like it had been recorded on a wiretap. I recognized her voice instantly. Calm, warm, amused. And then another voice. Colby's. But he sounded different than I remembered. More clinical. Measured. The recording played them talking about me. About baseline behaviors and response tracking and reinforcement pacing. About how I'd finally started asking questions too soon. About how I wasn't supposed to see the sweater yet. And then she said, softly, almost affectionately, he's been more resistant than expected. But I'll get him back on script. Back on script. What script? What was I following? I closed the laptop. Sat on the bathroom floor. Everything inside me had gone silent. I looked in the mirror. Really looked. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't sure if the man staring back at me had ever really made his own choices, or if he was just a character someone else had written. I didn't go back to bed that night. I sat in the kitchen with the lights off, a mug of untouched tea going cold between my hands. At some point, the sun began to rise, pale and gray, sneaking between the blinds like it was afraid to witness anything. I listened to the house breathe, the creak of old floorboards, the faint hum of the fridge, her breathing from down the hallway. Soft, steady, the sound of someone utterly at peace. The contrast was unbearable. There was something about that final sentence in the audio, I'll get him back on script, that echoed in me differently than everything else. Not just sinister, not just manipulative. It sounded tired, like someone holding on to a story that was falling apart at the seams. That's when the fear began to unravel, and in its place came something I didn't expect: pity. I knew what I had to do. No confrontations. No stage drama. No final accusations. I wasn't interested in catching her in some final lie or watching her break down. I didn't want revenge. I didn't want her to explain anything. I just wanted out. I went to the bedroom, quietly packed a small duffel bag, just clothes, my laptop, and a worn-out copy of Slaughterhouse-5 that still smelled like high school, and I left. I didn't write a note. I didn't slam the door. I didn't even look at her one last time. I drove until my phone lost signal. I stayed off-grid for a while. No social media. No bank cards. I rented a short-term cabin 3 hours north and paid in cash. It wasn't much, dusty couch, temperamental hot water, but it was quiet. And it was mine. I sat with silence until the silence stopped feeling like punishment and started feeling like permission. In those first few weeks, I slept more than I had in years. Not deeply, not peacefully, but longer. I cooked for myself, took long walks through moss-covered trails. I started journaling, even though I'd always hated the idea. Every entry felt ridiculous at first. Dear Diary, my wife might be brainwashing me. But eventually, the thoughts became clearer. more grounded. The fear began to dissolve into something closer to awareness. A long, slow waking up. Here's the part one never expected. One day, maybe a month into my solitude, I laughed. Out loud. At nothing in particular. Just the absurdity of it all. I was walking past a row of crooked trees that looked like they were holding hands, and something about that image, those awkward, wind-bent limbs clinging to each other for balance, broke something open in me. I laughed until I cried. And then I cried until I stopped needing to. That was the turning point. After that, I started writing more. Not just journal entries, but stories. Short fiction mostly. Things that had nothing to do with her, or Colby, or secret cabins. Just strange little tales about strange little people. One about a man who finds a town that doesn't exist on any map. Another about a child who remembers a past life and won't stop talking about it. They weren't great, but they were mine. And when I wrote, I felt more like myself than I had in years. Months passed. I changed my number. Moved again. Found work doing freelance tech support for small businesses. Nothing glamorous, but I liked it. It was honest work. No one tried to manipulate my thoughts. No one whispered instructions. I never heard from her again. I don't know if she ever came looking. Maybe she kept up whatever script she was trying to run. Maybe Colby was real. Maybe he wasn't. I stopped trying to solve that part. It didn't matter anymore. Because here's what I finally realized. I had spent so much of my life trying to make sense of her, trying to decode what she wanted, what she hid, what she broke, that I had completely lost the plot of my own story. And maybe she didn't steal that from me. Maybe I gave it away, little pieces at a time, just to keep something alive that had already died. But not anymore. Now, I wake up to silence and coffee and trees that don't care who I used to be. I listen to wind instead of whispered lies. I look in the mirror and see a man with tired eyes and a crooked smile, and, finally, no one standing behind him. I'm not healed yet, but I'm free. And for the first time in years, I know exactly who I am. A man who wrote his own ending.